Hello, I am Colby Lopez, a student and student government senator/treasurer at WVU Tech and politician from Southern West Virginia. This will be a video in which I discuss current events in state politics. So, it is the beginning of March of 2021, and the West Virginia legislature is considering, for one, they are considering a resolution which would call for an amendment to the United States Constitution, which would term limit members of the United States Congress. And then there is another resolution in the legislature proposing term limits for the state executive offices here in West Virginia. Those offices being the treasurer, auditor, attorney general, agriculture commissioner, and I believe there may be others, but those are the ones that come to mind. As a progressive, I am anti-corruption, and also believe in representing the people. A supermajority of the people want term limits not only here in West Virginia, but in the United States. This is obviously difficult due to the fact that it is asking politicians to limit themselves to the amount of power that they can gain. And while there are positives to term limits, such as fighting the incumbency bias in elections, term limits are in reality a way for executive office holders and members of government agencies to consolidate power, and leads to lobbyists bypassing the legislature, going directly to the executive, whether that be a governor or president or an agency head or employee. As a result, term limits will actually lead to a higher level of corruption, and term limits will also take power away from the voters, as popular incumbents that are actually getting their promises done will be limited to the amount of time that they are able to serve. In state legislatures where term limits exist, it is commonplace for experienced legislatures to, instead of being looked at with potential expertise, potential leadership, connections, etc., for it to become commonplace for them to, after their first term or second term, become a lame duck legislature, viewed as losing power soon, even if they were just elected to another term, meaning that legislatures that are duly elected are not given as much power as they should. Term limits not only lead to higher amounts of corruption, it also upsets the system of checks and balances, as it reconcentrates power into the executive branch, as well as the judicial branch. While now I do understand that we need to do something to prevent incumbents that don't get stuff done from holding office forever. As a result, my proposal, instead of term limits, is to implement a practice of fractional terms. So let's just say if we gave United States senators, a term limit of 2 terms, 12 years. Under regular term limit laws, that would simply mean that after 12 years, they would be forced to retire from the United States Senate. If under a fractional term system that I am proposing, then after serving those 2 terms, if the incumbent chose to run again and they be elected to a 3rd term, instead of serving a full 6-year term, they would instead serve half of that, so a 3-year term. Now, if their opponent won, they would still be elected to a 6-year term. So, and then from that point on, the incumbent, if they were to run again after that 3-year term, they would be elected to another 3-year term, and so forth. Meaning that they face the voters on a more frequent basis. Now, there is a problem with this way of doing things, because for 6-year terms, dividing it by 2 is 3, and for 4-year terms, it's 2, which is perfectly fine. However, with the U.S. House of Representatives, we are presented with a 2-year term, which if we half that, we would get a 1-year term, which in effect would mean that there would never be a break for the incumbent to actually legislate, and rather would be just running for election 24/7. As such, it would require a constitutional amendment, obviously, to do this fractional term limit system. So, in that constitutional amendment, I would propose increasing the terms of any political office that is 2 years to be 3-year terms, so that if a fractional half term occurs with an incumbent being elected to an additional term, then they would be elected for a 1.5-year term, as this would provide a couple extra months for the representative to legislate rather than campaign. So I fully understand why term limits are popular, and I fully understand the idea that it could lessen corruption in the legislative branch. However, while it does limit corruption in the legislative branch, it significantly increases it in the executive and judicial branches, as well as removing legislative checks on that corruption, and if legislatures were to receive those term limits. Now, obviously, we have term limits most commonly on executive offices. In West Virginia, we have term limits on the governorship, and at the federal level, we have term limits on the presidency. To dispel a myth, George Washington, whenever he chose not to run for a 3rd term, it was not because he believed that no president should be elected to a 3rd term. It was rather he did not want to be president for life, personally. The president who spoke in favor of the 2-term limit prior to it being formally in the Constitution was President Jefferson, who believed that presidents should only serve 2 terms, something he actually wanted to be part of the original Constitution. The fact that it was not should let you know that there were also many founding fathers who vehemently argued against term limits. Whenever term limits were introduced, It was as a direct result of Republicans not wanting to be out of power after a popular Democratic president was elected for 4 straight terms. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, one of the presidents commonly referred to by progressives as a wonderful president. While I may be biased in my argument against traditional term limits, as I am a politician and I am a progressive who as such has been the target of the majority of term limit laws, the fact that progressives are the target should let you know that term limit laws do not actually target corruption, but rather are attempts to consolidate power. So I understand these term limit resolutions and proposals, and I understand the motivations behind them. However, that is not what would occur if they were to be ratified. As such, that is why I made this video explaining a better system of fractional terms. Please like this video, share it with friends and family, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, making sure to hit the bell icon. Please also check out my social media, Instagram at Lopez for Change, Twitter at Lopez for Change, Snapchat at Lopez for OakHillWV, and Facebook, facebook.com/colby.lopez.12, which all should be linked in the description. Please stay safe and de-stress. I'm Colby Lopez, and I approve this message.